And welcome back, everyone. You're watching 2 News Oklahoma today. And look who's joining us this morning, Senator James Lankford. It's so good to have you here live and in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's glad to be able to be here.
Yeah, it's
glad
awesome.
glad to be meeting you for the first time, too, as well, and in person. So,
welcome to Oklahoma. Yeah.
Thank you. Not too long I've been here, but we're hitting the ground running. And speaking of that, we don't have too much time, a lot to talk about. And the big news that we've kind of been talking about, of course, COVID, but the debt ceiling, the national debt. You say you're against kind of pushing that back, continuing to push that back. And you say we have to take shutting the government down off the table,
right.
And that all of Congress, you say, needs to stay in town, presumably, we're talking about Washington, D.C., to get this done.
Right.
So what does controlling national debt look like to you? How does that get done from Congress?
So there's really two issues that are there. We're the only country in the world that has a debt ceiling. Other countries don't do it this way. We have the debt ceiling vote because it creates a moment when we have to have a national debate about debt. Mm-hmm. We have to pause. Congress has to be able to debate this out to figure out how do we get out of debt, not just add more debt. The last several debt ceiling votes, there's been no conversation about reducing debt. It's just extend it, keep going. So my push has been, let's do what it's supposed to do. Let's actually have a debate. We have $29 trillion in total debt. To tell you how big that is and how fast it's growing, when Ronald Reagan was president, our nation had $1 trillion in total debt. Now it's accelerated all to $29 trillion just in that short time period. So we're rapidly growing in debt. We should have real conversation about this. The other issue is government shutdowns. So the government shutdown and the debt ceiling kind of all hit at the same moment at this time, but they're typically separated. We shouldn't have government shutdowns. We get to the end of the fiscal year. If Congress hasn't done its work, there's a simple solution to this. Everybody has to stay after school and keep working until they actually get it done. So the bill that I have wouldn't allow a government shutdown. If you got to that moment, government would continue on, but members of Congress and our staff could not leave Washington and couldn't move to other bills other than the appropriation bills until it actually gets solved. My focus is let's actually put the pressure where the pressure should be on members of Congress, not on the American people, to be able to solve how that's going to happen. But we've got to be able to separately solve the debt ceiling issue.
And, speaking of money, we're talking about, these checks that are going out to those who are unemployed. And you've kind of saying that, this is encouraging them not to work. So my question for you is, what about the people who have, lost their jobs, or parents who have had to quit their jobs and stay home with the kids? So what is the resolution moving forward with all of this?
Yeah, so the COVID time period's been a crazy time period. There's a lot that happened last year to try to keep the economy going and to figure out what to do on this. Now, as we have the vaccines out there, people have access to be able to get back to work, all those things, we've got to be able to turn the attention from the COVID pandemic time to knowing this is endemic. We're going to have COVID around us all the time. I encourage people to get vaccinated. I'm very opposed to the mandate, but allowing people to be able to get back to work and to be able to get going is a good thing to do. If we go back to the time of Bill Clinton, he stood in front of the country in the 1990s and said, we're going to end welfare as we know it. We're not going to send checks to people, because if we send checks to people, it incentivizes people not to work. So there was an incentive built in the 1990s to be able to return to work. Well, that's gone away now. There's been, what Democrats passed in March of this year was literally additional payments that went to people not to go to work. We have 5 million people right now that were at work 2 years ago that have chosen not to return to work. That's breaking down our supply chain and our economy. That's a major problem. We as a country have got to engage with saying it is best for our economy and for our families, and quite frankly, as a role model of parents to kids, for folks to actually be involved in work. Work's not punishment. That's a good thing, and we need to be able to incentivize work and people to be able to engage there.
And kind of on that topic, speaking of work, oil, gas, huge in Oklahoma and Tulsa in particular as well. You mentioned, going back to that $3.5 trillion spending bill there, a methane fee and how that would destroy in some form the economy in Oklahoma. Kind of expand on that and why you see that as happening.
So there's a lot of things in this $3.5 trillion proposal that people are taking a look at and saying, I really don't think that's a good idea. It's not just the cost of it, it's the content that's actually in it's the problem. One of these things is a methane fee. No question this would drive up the cost of electricity and energy for everyone across the country, certainly across our region. They're trying to be able to target other taxes as well to say normal businesses, a restaurant, a store, get tax benefits on this. If you do oil and gas, you get none on that as well. So they're layering that. They're also putting on power companies an additional set of regulations saying you have to shift away from anything that's oil and gas related, and it has to go to somewhere else, to some other renewable. All three of those things they've stacked together, all three of those things would dramatically increase the price. We've all experienced price increases this year just based on the inflation from that bill that was done earlier this year in March. That bill itself has driven up inflation dramatically. We right now have the highest inflation since we did in 1982. And it's really continuing to accelerate. The average family right now is paying $175 more a month just on normal gas and utilities right now versus what we were 2 years ago. So we're all feeling it. And there's this sense of, why is this happening? Why are we getting this rapid price acceleration? It's the inflation that was caused from that bill in March. It's all the threats of what is actually coming, and it's actually causing a lot of changes in our prices. We've got to get prices stable again, because this hurts the poorest of the poor and people on fixed income the most.
I wanted to shift back to coronavirus a little bit. You've been very vocal about your opposition to vaccine mandates. You've even introduced the Stop Vaccine Mandates Act, which is repealing the president's, executive order on those vaccine mandates to federal workers and employees and contractors. You have said yourself that your family did choose to get vaccinated. Right. Can you kind of speak on that just a little bit more for us?
I can. I'm an American. I get a choice, and I think everyone else should get a choice as well in this. When the vaccine came out, very grateful for what happened there, the research, the science that went into it. I took the vaccine, my wife and my family, we took the vaccine. Grateful, because I obviously interact with a lot of people on that. Other people have made decisions to say they don't want to do that. What the Biden administration is doing right now is saying, I don't care what your personal decisions are. This is my personal decisions, what the president's saying, you've got to go do it. Just ignoring the 44 million Americans that have already had COVID and recovered, they have natural immunity, ignoring people that are cancer patients, that their doctor is telling them, don't do this while you're actually going through treatment, ignoring the people that are pregnant or trying to get pregnant that have questions, people with religious objections. That's not how we do it as Americans. I have no problem with encouraging people to do that. Myself, the governor, multiple other folks have stepped forward very vocally to say we shouldn't have mandates, but we've taken the vaccine. We encourage people to be able to do it. But people have personal and individual or family reasons not to be able to take it, and those need to be respected, especially for those folks that have already had COVID and are recovered and are going through it. And for employers, right now they're putting mandates on them, or for individuals that are union members, that their union has decided they're not going to represent them as an employee, they're going to represent the Biden administration. We've got to be able to push back on this and to say, listen, let's encourage, but let's not lay mandates down on people as Americans. We're stubborn enough that if you tell us we have to do something, we just say, oh, no, I'm not. But we can go through this. And for individuals that are not vaccinated, that are afraid to be around people that are unvaccinated, when you're vaccinated, it's not like unvaccinated people have a different COVID on that they're struggling through. So for me, let's continue to encourage, but these mandates are really causing a lot of problems. It is the number one question I've had from people the last couple of weeks when they want to talk to me about an issue. It's about these mandates and their opposition.
So you're opposing the mandates, but just to clarify, you are completely encouraging those out there to get the vaccine.
I do. I encourage people to get the vaccine, but again, that's their own personal choice. We're Americans. We make personal choices. That's part of our personal freedom. And people have all kinds of issues, especially when their family doctor, when they're going through certain treatments, say, not right now, let's pause and wait. We shouldn't have the CDC and the president saying, I don't care what your doctor says, you're going to do it anyway. That's not who we are.
All right, and kind of talking about government and the president as well, you have introduced legislation to not allow dishonorable discharges in the military.
Right. That's
for those
correct.
who choose not to. We're coming up on Veterans Day, so I think it's a topic we should be talking about. Why do you think that's not good, first of all, dishonorable discharge for this? And what is the course that maybe service members should be taking?
So it's really interesting. If you're active duty military, and anyone who's been in the military know, the first day that you joined, they said, I'm so grateful you're here. Welcome to the military. Roll up your sleeve. Right. And they got about 10 immunizations that day. They got a lot. So if you're in the military and you're active duty, that's very different for them in getting the vaccinations. There's some individuals that have said, hey, I've got a problem with this. I'm not going to choose to do it. What's happening now is the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force all have different rules of how they're handling it. The Army has said, we're not going to give anyone a dishonorable discharge or a less than honorable discharge. We're going to write a memo, put it in their file, and they can't get promoted if they don't get the vaccine. You go over to the Air Force and the Navy, or the Air Force especially, and they're saying, we're looking at a less than honorable discharge. The Navy is still saying, we're thinking about it. I want to just make it blanket. No one have to worry about a dishonorable discharge if they've been fighting for our country, standing for our country, and then they say, hey, I have a real concern with this vaccine. Again, especially with those folks that have religious questions on it, or those folks that have already had COVID and recovered. They're not a high risk at that point. they're not going to have severe COVID again if they've already had COVID and recovered from it, just like the vaccine protects from severe COVID as well. So I think there needs to be a little science applied to all this. There are some folks that are actually pushing this in a way that I think that's not the right thing to be able to do. And you're right, as we approach Veterans Day, where in the world would we take somebody who's been serving our country faithfully for 15 years and to say, I'm sorry, if you don't get this particular shot, even though you've already had COVID and recovered, then we're going to kick you out of the military with a dishonorable discharge? That shouldn't even be on the table.
All right. Well, Senator Lankford, we appreciate you getting up early with us, coming here and
here.
answering all of our questions. You're welcome here anytime, so
Great.
we're certainly glad to have you. All right, don't go anywhere. We will be right back on 2 News Oklahoma today.